going to start through my watch is I've just realised this, although having had the battle changed at the weekend and having not actually properly checked the time, which was very unmilitary of me, I have to say, obviously out of habit. Welcome to the Environment Select Committee on Monday the 15th of September 2025. I am Greg Hammond, I'm the chair of the committee, and we will start this evening with 72-second silence to remember those of our friends and neighbours who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy in 2017.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much indeed. We've had apologies for absence from Councillor Matt over tonight. And Councillor Schmetterling has just texted me to apologise for being about 30 minutes late. I'm reply to presently. I don't think we don't know anything about Councillor Benson being okay. Well, we'll press on. We are quorum. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? Not okay. The next item in the minutes of the previous meeting, are we content that I can sign them as being silence? Yes.
Yes.
Will you sign them? Yes. Right. And we can go straight then into the main business item 4 then, the way to such in strip cleansing update paper. So you'd like to remember Johnny and Senior Officer to introduce it, please.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hammond. This is a fairly brief paper, but it covers one of the things that I think our residents care most about. It's a really high-profile, impactful, visible, universal service. I think we can be fairly proud that we have a really strong level of service in the borough, but I'm by no means complacent. There are still too many places where residents and councillors say to me there's waste left out when it shouldn't be, or that there isn't enough enforcement around some of the waste issues that we have. So I think the thing that I'm really, and there's lots of good stuff happening in terms of food waste rollout and recycling, but the thing that I'm really looking at here is the Cleaner Streets proposal, trying to cajole colleagues and work with them to increase our investment in street cleaning, so that we do have I think we already do, but even more so the cleanest streets in London. That's definitely the ambition, and there's a level of investment and service that I think we need in order to achieve that. So working really hard with Terry and his team to understand how we can best apply the resource we have to make sure the service is enhanced. Elsewhere, I've had some pretty good feedback about time banding where it's been introduced. I think we're pretty close now to capacity in terms of the number of streets we can roll it out to, but again, something that I'm interested in looking at further, particularly, for example, in some of the amazing spaces that we've rolled out, where parts of the deal for residents who see their areas change a bit and potentially there's a higher footfall should be that there's additional care taken to ensure that the street is clean and well looked after, and that the commercial operators are playing their part too. So those are a couple of the areas I would highlight, but overall I think we've got a strong service, and the ambition is quite quickly to improve it even further, hopefully in time for the next year.
Thank you, Johnny, and I'm sorry, leaving to add anything to the Director of Service.
Just echo as CT's points that it is a really strong service, but we are looking to obviously where improvements can be made and make improvements. There is a big focus on increasing recycling, especially around food waste. That's a big area of growth, and we do want to roll that out borough-wide by the end of this year, which would be fantastic. There's a lot of work going on the estates as well. We are moving in the right direction in terms of our recycling rate. It's still quite low, but comparable with other central London boroughs. We don't have a huge amount of garden waste, which really skews the stats. And again, actual residual waste is coming down per household, which is kind of what we want. So in that waste hierarchy, it's about reducing waste in the first place and then recycling, reusing, etc. So they're heading in the right direction, the stats, which is good, but there's more work to be done there, and that's where the team's going to focus.
Thank you very much. Very grateful for the report. So I'll start far into the table of 10 work this way.
Sure.
The committee questions.
Thank you very much. Out of curiosity, looking at the ward level data for the curbside collection and the food waste, out of curiosity, those scored currently number none offered, and as soon as the new vehicles come in place, basically everyone in the ward can get it. What is it about the current situation in your scope that you can't offer anything now? And what is it about the new vehicles that will change that? And when do we expect those new vehicles?
Talking about capacity of the crews. So the government basically legislated that from the 1st of April 2026, food waste has to be on offer to residents, and that's the time frame we're working to. So the vehicles are on order. There's a big leading time for that, but we do want to, from the 1st of April, be able to offer that to every resident in Earls Court.
So how are you building up to that? Because I imagine that you would hope to have vehicles before the 1st of April, because you don't want to start that on the 1st of April, right?
Yeah, there's a leading time for that. So there's going to be a big comms campaign as well. People will opt in to the scheme as well. We have about a 30% participation rate for food waste, and that varies kind of every week. So it's not always the same people taking part. So you have to offer it to more. As comms go out, people opt into the scheme. Then they get the caddies delivered, they get the liners and stuff delivered, they get told how to present their waste as well. And that's really important for food waste, because otherwise you end up with loads of caddies on the street and things like that. So it's got to be done for suitable properties. So we don't have this kind of, the streets are inundated with caddies and stuff. So there is the comms campaign, so that will be starting much earlier than the 1st of April. I can get you a time frame for that, and we will definitely involve them.
That would be interesting just to see. And when it comes to blocks of flats, obviously it's a bit more difficult. You need to negotiate where those bins will be held, etc. How is that going?
So we've got two multiple occupancy homes. It's worked quite well where we actually have a shared large caddy outside, so everyone has a small caddy in their flat. So it's a 5 litre caddy with liners, and then there's a larger kind of communal caddy outside, and then that is what's collected on a weekly basis. Again, that's dependent on whether there's some kind of front garden or area that caddy can be stored. And then on the estates as well, we're introducing kind of communal bins as well next to the recycling areas, which again proved really popular. So on the World's End estates, we put in communal food waste bins. We had to double that within a few weeks because it's such a popular scheme. And then the recycling banks and the bring sites on the streets as well. We've got communal kind of food waste recycling there as well. So if there's any other ideas around how we can engage with residents around this, then I'd be really happy to hear those.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to street cleanliness and street washing.
Yeah.
Obviously, in street cleaning, you differentiate between Z zones, zones 1 and zones 2.
Yeah.
Is there also differentiation when it comes to street washing? How often do you wash the streets, basically? And is there a differentiation within those zones as well on that?
There is, yes. So the Z zones are our key kind of high streets, and they do get washed more often. Again, that's about 3 or 4 times a year at the moment, then less for zone 1, and then mostly I think the zone 2 is once a year, or it's health and safety led. So if there's a tree that has fruit on it or whatever, and it falls onto the footprint, or it grows moss or slippery, then that does get jet washed as well. So they're certainly much more of a focus on Z zones and zone 1. And then it's more health and safety driven. But there is.
Do you do additional cleaning when there are lots of I'm not going to say complaints, but people advising that particular areas are really, really dirty?
We do, yeah. Again, it's a case-by-case basis. So hopefully you don't get to that situation in the first place. But if it can be linked into kind of the health and safety issue as well, so if it's slippery or it's really sticky or things like that, then we do really prioritise that.
From personal experience, I've noticed that this Hogarth Road, for instance, is regularly washed because the businesses put their garbage outside right next to the bins, and that gets easily quite dirty. So I've noticed that is cleaned quite regularly. But then other zone 1s, like for instance, Old Brompton Road, they have a lot of businesses, restaurants there as well. Some of the areas around the bins are absolutely appalling at some stage, and yeah, that could. I think those areas could actually need more washing.
No, I completely agree. And I think I suppose there's a number of approaches to take as well. So there is the jet washing, but there's also trying to deal with the problem as well. And a lot of the restaurants are told how to present their waste, and if they're not doing that correctly, then enforcement action can be taken. And usually, a Section 47 notice can be issued to say you have to double bag, you have to place any kind of food waste on cardboard as well. So there's preventative measures that should be taking place. Kind of jet washing is the last resort. We kind of wanted to basically don't want the stain in the first place. But if there is any kind of area like that, then do let me know. I can't guarantee that we can get to it straight away, but of course we certainly can if resources allow us to certainly tackle those areas more. But it is working with the businesses as well. I think that's the key to make sure that it doesn't happen in the first place.
That's it for me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Maybe just follow up, kind of. What about households for the caddies and stuff that don't, or flats that don't have storage? Maybe they're above shops, or there's just nowhere for them to put these new additional bins. What do you do with them?
It's a really good point, and we do recognise that space is the biggest constraint in this borough. So we have got a few communal food waste bins. So where you see the bring sites, so the glass banks and things like that, then there are communal food waste bins at those sites now. And there are on estates as well. So they're usually by the entrance of estates. So people can, obviously, if they've got a little caddy in their flat, then if they don't mind walking it to the nearest.
If they're not near an estate, if there's above shops and maybe there's nothing, or they're not familiar with it, how do you tell them about it, I guess, their local one?
We can look at a kind of a communal one. So if there are some flats above shops, there's usually is like some bin storage areas. So we can look at doing that. The food waste team will be engaging with all of the residents and kind of the different people who might be using food waste to try and iron out some of those problems. It's being rolled out across the country, so we do have to tackle those, and there are solutions for it. So we want to be able to offer food waste to every resident, and that's kind of what government has set us to do, and there will be that kind of detailed engagement. So I'll talk to the team about flats above shops, but there will be solutions for it, and whether there is a communal bin that they can use which is quite near to them, then that's fine. And the little caddy is only kind of 5 litres, so it's pretty small.
Yeah. And then to do with like recycling and contamination, so obviously we should know what to recycle and what goes where and what is not maybe recyclable, but you might think it is. How annoyed does that get for people, for the refuse people? And is it something you can overcome? Because I just think that some people will just be like, oh yeah, that's it's like an afterthought, don't really think about it. Oh, it looks like recycling. What do you do with that?
So it's a really good question. So that is actually something that as a council we're really good at, and our residents are really good at, and our crews are really good at resolving. So our contamination rate is around 10%, which sounds a lot, but compared to other councils, they've actually double that. And there's some really good training that Suez do for the crews. So we've got all the clear bags, so they can see what is recyclable and what isn't. I think a few residents get confused as well because our vans are our collection lorries are 50-50 split.
Yeah.
So one side is recycling, one side is general waste. So we often get complaints saying, "Oh, I've seen our recycling get chucked into the same lorry as the general waste," and that is true,
Yeah.
but they're segregated, so it's 50-50. If the operatives actually see a recycling bag that is contaminated, they will put it in the general waste, because otherwise it does contaminate the whole waste, the whole recycling amount as well. So that's key as well. But overall, I think residents are very good at kind of knowing. There's a door knocking campaign as well, where we are going around just either speaking to residents or just leaving leaflets and stuff for them. There's a leaflet in the recycling bag as well to say, this is what you can recycle, this is what you can't. And if we say, the message kind of is, if you don't know, leave it out. It's easier that way than kind of contaminating a whole load of recycling. But as a council, we are sort of one of the lowest, and it's very rare to get kind of a 10% contamination rate across a contract of this size.
It's good to hear that you're doing something to sort of counteract that as well, and maybe that door knocking might help some.
There's a whole comms piece around it as well, and there is going to be potentially a food waste campaign as well, which Pan London, because what we're finding now is it's called simpler recycling. So the government is trying to make recycling simpler, basically. So you can recycle the same products wherever you live, because it does get confusing. Like different councils collect different things and stuff. So they've tried to make it the same across the whole of the country.
Okay, I have one more and then I will stop. Cleanest streets. Now that's quite a title. How do you how can you monitor that, first of all, and what can we do to ensure that is the case? Fine, I know we're working into it, but how on earth do you compare it to other streets to be the cleanest? Is quite a statement. So I need more detail.
It's a really good question again, and it's just to set that really high level of ambition. The KPIs exactly need to be confirmed, but we do use the previous national indicators. So NI 195, which does look at kind of litter, looks at detritus, it looks at PT across the borough. So we do want to get the lowest of that. There isn't a universal performance indicator that all councils use. So I think it's got to be a bit on the kind of feedback we get from councillors, feedback from residents as well, and obviously has some stats that back that up as well.
The one metric that is used for Terry's area is number of bin collections every week. And this is the only place in London with twice weekly bin collections. That's not something that any Labour, Liberal Democrat or any other kind of council offers anywhere in the city. So
Conservative.
I think Wallace got the point.
Any other questions?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you, Chair. My questions are on the following. With the my understanding is the government is going to is there a move towards mandatory food recycling?
Yeah.
Okay. So
from the 1st of April 2026.
I think it's been being phased in for a couple of years.
Yeah, but is it going to be something mandatory for every household to do, as opposed to, it's not a choice, is it?
It's not forcing the households to do it. Basically, the council has to offer it.
Okay.
So every household
Forcing it
who
on.
wants to do it should be able to do it.
Yeah.
My other question is, when you collect food, do you collect it? Is there? I know there's a compartment for recycling, a compartment for the regular waste. Does it get collected in the same car with a different thing, or this is something another car comes and collects the food?
Yeah, it's a separate vehicle, which needs So it's a smaller kind of refuse collection vehicle, which has been specially designed for food waste, because there's a lot of liquid in food waste, and if you put it into a normal RCV, then you get what they term bin juice everywhere, and it's not the nicest. So this is a watertight vehicle.
And is that also twice a week?
Food waste is once a week.
Once a week.
Yeah.
Okay. Once a week. My other question is
that's on top of your twice a week collection.
Yeah. So it's we have 3 times collections, one for food. And on 5.7, you're talking about different solution, the line before last in the first paragraph, you're talking about we are getting ready to trial different solutions for these, but concentrating first. What are these, can you give me an idea, an example of the solutions you're trialing?
This goes back to kind of the shops, the flats above shops. The way that we deliver food waste or collect food waste at the moment is, so residents have a very small caddy in their kitchen, then the liner is put into a bigger caddy, which is usually stored kind of in the front garden, or if there's a little courtyard area on the property, then that's where the larger caddy gets collected from and put back there. If you don't have any kind of outdoor space, then what we don't want is the street full of kind of individual caddies. So it's trying to come up with a solution where if you don't have that space, then is there a communal bin for the streets? Is it on a nearby bring centre? Is it on a nearby estate, which kind of has food waste collections already? So there's a number of different solutions being looked at where space is an issue.
On the street washing, Draco Avenue, as you know, has just been redone and turned into a smallish plaza.
Yeah.
But within days, because of the new setup, businesses have to bring their waste from in front of their shop or in front of their business to an outside area. That area is extremely greasy, and it is not the slipping as such, but actually now it is already discolored and it already looks murky, and some people are going, we should have just had the old street, just being, tarred and black and easy. But what can we do? I mean, do we have to continuously keep coming to you? I mean, do you have a system whereby someone actually goes and looks at these areas and pinpoints and some maybe anticipate problematic areas and manage the cleaning that way?
There is the monitoring of that, so I will get the team to go and have a look at that. It is, and Draco Avenue is also going to be in the time banding collection. So again, it's around presenting the waste. So we tell businesses, especially if there's a large proportion of food waste in there, it needs to be double bagged and on cardboard to stop that seepage.
Okay.
If that's not happening, then enforcement can start. So it's a bit of carrot and stick, to be fair. And we can try and make it as easy as possible for them to dispose of the waste. But I think if they're not playing ball and are just putting out rubbish that is staying on the streets, then we do have to go down the enforcement.
So, yeah.
And also about the times for collection. We talked about that, I think, in a previous meeting, about reducing the hours so that it is not such a wide space, because sometimes it kind of jumps from one zone or one timing to another.
Yeah.
Is there a way we can, for certain streets, have it a shorter window, or will that mess up with your rota?
So Draco Avenue is being
on
yeah.
I mean, I think it might even go up this week if it hasn't already.
Okay.
So you can give your view of the consultation. But I think the kind of slightly wider point you're making about places where we've invested.
Yeah.
I think over time we might want to look at an enhanced level of kind of cleaning.
Exactly.
In amazing spaces,
Yeah.
because we want to back up the investment
Exactly.
and keep those places incredible.
And on the time banding question, so there is going to be a review after the first year, which starts soon. And I think now that it has embedded, we could look at reducing some of the collection windows, because there's quite a few of them. And so ideally that's the plan, or the objective of that scheme is to not have waste presented or limit the amount of time it's presented on the street. So I think now that it is working quite well, we can kind of tweak it and reduce the hours.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much indeed. And now I do have some questions myself, and I'm sure Councillor Smettering has, but I'll give him a chance to settle in to A4. But Joanna, you're joining us, and the councillor not on the committee, so why don't you ask him the questions that you'd like to?
Thank you. So food waste, how do we re-engage with those who in round one didn't take it up? So I know I have 7 neighbours, only 2 of us took.
Yeah, really,
Yeah.
really good question.
So that's pretty much bang on the 30% take up that we've been.
We will be doing some comms as well. There is going to be some Pan London comms that go out as well. But I've talked to the team and we'll make sure that previous rounds get re-engaged with. And do they have caddies and stuff already, or
No,
they
they haven't. But actually, they may have ignored the letter,
Yeah.
and then they just don't know about it. So actually, if there's something that we as councillors, if you want to send us a link that we can include in newsletters to say to people, here's how you can sign up again.
I'm sure there is a link somebody on our website where you can enrol on, but I will check.
Thank you. If I might,
Yep,
through the
please,
chair,
please do.
do we actually measure our garden recycling? Because I know when I was on Western Riverside, it was done by a separate company and therefore it didn't go into the recycling business. Does it go?
It's a separate collection, but it's conducted by Suez. Again,
So it doesn't.
we've got the tonnage. We've got the tonnage.
So they are in.
Yeah.
And then my final question is bird things.
Yeah.
So Nottingham Gate, I discovered that people feed birds, so the bird collection is getting bigger. What other solutions can we look at as opposed to cleaning? Because I'm conscious I know Caulfield has a PSBO, but I don't know how enforceable that is. And I would actually rather look at some of the schemes that I've seen in Westminster, whereby they potentially have a bird of prey to actually deal with it. I think for me, it's one of our biggest areas. So it's all very well having time banding, but the street just becomes a mess.
I'd say that way, Councillor, because I think there is, as you said, there's the PSBO, there is pigeon proofing or bird proofing, but if it is the feeding that's causing the birds, then it's very problematic. So there is engagement, obviously, with the individuals that do it to discourage them, but that doesn't really seem to work that well. So what I can do is talk to the team, our SEC team, our street enforcement team, sorry, and the PSPO team, just to see what can be done, but it's not in your game.
Yeah, but my concern is it makes all our benches unusable, or you sit on them in your peril. So actually, I would like a longer term solution as opposed to just street washing. And even now, we don't do enough street washing in relation to the amount of food.
Yeah, it's a real tricky one to resolve. Yeah, thank you.
Dory.
Thanks. Again, apologies for being late, but something came up I just couldn't avoid. So I'm sorry if I don't know whether the subject has been already debated, but on the it's about food waste collections.
Yeah.
I mean, there's two sort of related questions. One of it, in the data here. Oh yes, in the food waste, how much non-food is actually in that? And how much of it, the related question is, how much of it is actually usable food waste?
So this, it's hard to tell. So overall, when we done the waste composition analysis previously, of all the waste created by a household, around 37% is food waste. And what we mean by food waste, it is kind of your tea bags, your coffee grinds, your peelings, things like that. It's not kind of a loaf of bread you haven't touched.
No,
in the bin.
peelings and things.
Yeah. So that's around 37% of the waste.
Does that get measured? I wonder. But
There is the methodology. So
okay,
there's about 100 homes that are selected, and then those bags are collected, and it's all measured out into different transects.
somebody stands there and separates them.
Oh,
Like a
right.
person.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
but
not-
how much of the actual food waste is usable?
When you mean use, it's all turned into soil conditioner. So it goes to an AD plant, so an anaerobic digestion plant,
Sorry.
where some of that's giving off some gas, some methane, that's collected and used for heat and energy. But then the rest, it kind of rots down and becomes what's called a soil conditioner. So it's like a fertilizer, which is kind of sold back to farmers.
I mean, when I wonder, I mean, this is nothing much we can do about it directly, but I've always wondered what the cost of this is, the energy cost and the financial cost
Yeah.
of doing all this?
So from an energy perspective, it's more energy efficient.
Okay.
So if when we were putting stuff in landfill, which we don't anymore, it was one of the main sources of kind of methane and greenhouse gas. So food waste gives off a huge amount of gas. So turning it back into soil conditioner, putting it back onto into the soil actually traps carbon. So overall, it's very environmentally friendly, and it's that kind of circular economy. In terms of cost, at the moment, we're very lucky in that the government are actually funding the scheme. So we get all our costs plus more from the government to deliver food waste at the moment. So as part of their simpler recycling initiative, they're giving every council a grant to deliver food waste. So the way that that's funded is through the extender producer responsibility. So it basically polluter pays. So if they're trying to reduce packaging, so all big companies or any company that has packaging has a levy put on them for the amount of packaging they produce. That then goes into a central pot and distributed to local authority.
Packaging getting thinner. Okay, well, there's a net cost. That's what somebody has to pay. Maybe we don't do council. But
Yeah, it's not directly funded by the council anymore.
No,
So they
it's
bought
not.
our vehicles, they bought all the caddies.
No, it's paid for by the customer.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah,
it's a
okay.
tax,
Right.
yeah, it is a
Yeah,
tax.
as opposed to dispose of it in another way. But of course, you've just given a very good reason, which is the gas emissions, which is prevented.
And
Which I never thought of that one, but that's
And the
very good.
disposal costs as well are significantly cheaper. So when food waste is in general waste, it's around £170 a tonne to dispose of. With food waste, it's zero. So we get zero gate fee at the moment for
Right.
food waste.
So on this question of recycling, I've got just one more, I think. Now the general recycling is I see because the contamination rate's 10%, which is actually
Good.
quite low. I'm
It is
quite
very-
surprised to see that low figure.
Yeah, no, we're
I mean, is there any way? It's probably very hot because it's like getting marginal now to try and reduce it. Because I know what happens in my own home for recycling. Some stuff I have to fish out that somebody else has put in. Sometimes, not very often. But how can we make it actually clearer? I know it can be very difficult because you have to write three A4 pages to write out exactly what's needed. But is there any way we can do a little bit more clearer on this sort of the leaflet that we put out? Because if you say mixed materials, you're not supposed to put mixed materials in, right? So you've got to. But what about these? I've checked it with the recycling facility. It is okay, but it's still mixed materials. It's when you get these packages with salads in and so on, and they're wrapped with paper. So I try to pull off as much paper as I can, but I still have paper on it. But apparently that's okay.
Yeah, there's certain things that are tolerable. There's certain things that are definitely no.
And I'm not going to spend hours, lots of energy washing stuff, because then you wind up using water and energy and that kind of thing. So is there any way, behavior to improve the recycling further? I mean, this looks really good to me, but the rate, the 37%, what's the figure for recycling versus
About 24% at the moment. About 24%.
which is apparently quite low relative to other boroughs around the country. Is that correct? Or am I wrong?
Around the country, it is for central London or urban rates, it's okay because a lot of
It's
the
space.
higher,
It's space.
and it's garden waste as well.
It's all to do with space.
So like
What?
Oxford,
Space.
Oh, space.
so
Yes.
Oxfordshire has one of the highest recycling rates, around 60-70%. But the majority of that is garden waste. We don't have gardens, and
Okay.
so you can't compare like for like, to be fair.
Fair enough. Okay, fair enough. So I'm just
And there's
wondering.
nowhere quite like KMC.
We know that, but we've got Westminster.
Totally.
So it's just
No, we're
maybe
on par
make the leaflet a bit clearer. That's all. Maybe write a sentence about. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you
very
very
much.
much. Your personal advice for recycling your house. Laura's got a follow-up question, and then I'll go into mine.
Yeah, just to follow up with the caddies and the once a week. Now, I know they're sealed and they're bins and whatever. However, surely if they're kept in some households that are maybe not the most hygienic households, does it not attract vermin? Would it not create more appetite for vermin to
It's a good question. That was our that's a really big concern when we started, was it will attract them, and there hasn't been any reports of that. They're sturdy caddies. They've got locks on as well, so as long as they're kind of locked, then it doesn't. We've had no feedback that burning is a problem, and that's been up and running for 3 or 4 years now. So I think if you left it like open, then yes. But
I'm thinking more, I guess,
You mean
in
without pots and-
households. Yeah, I think I'm really sort of thinking that would be more inclined to become a problem in households. So when it goes out, well, it's in the bin, so you know we can see it. So some good Samaritan would close the lid or whatever if it was open. But if it's in a household, they're not really maybe worried or concerned so much. Then
I think we've got to remember though that waste has been created anyway, so it would be in the bin.
But they might put it out in the bins. They'll put the bins out twice a week, so that's twice more likely for it to go before it becomes a problem. Whereas once a week, or if they maybe forget, then that's 2 weeks. You know what I mean?
No, I get where you're coming. Yeah, I'm not sure there's much reason we can do about that.
Maybe it's that education. Maybe there's, as we're promoting food waste collections to people, we can just make the point that it's particularly important that they dispose of it hygienically and that they consider the timings.
That would be great, and the tidy neighbours next to them would love it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we, Joanne, I think you've got something.
Also, are we planning to offer plastic, as in the disposable food carry bags again? Because
we've got reminders.
okay, because I have no idea how anybody collects any new ones. I don't think that's advertised at all.
Okay, I'll make sure that's on the website. So they should be delivered. If you're taking part, then
I got some delivered. I canvassed someone that wanted, these sorts of things. And
you can definitely go online and just email, and they do get delivered. So the guys that go around with the recycling bags also go around with the line.
Okay, so I'm going to, we've talked a lot about food waste. I've got questions on different subjects. I'll abandon food waste. So 5.27, you've hinted at 6 options for enhancing the street cleaning service, but there isn't any detail in the paper, and it appears to be an imminent presentation to the leadership team for decision. Now, I have the benefit of having seen a draft version of this paper where there was a bit more detail in there, but I wonder if you can set out, please, what these options are, what you're hoping to put forward, and how we can add any comments or value on that.
Yeah, so there's, as it says, 6 options there. There's one around kind of extra clear all crews. So they're the crews that go around just collecting waste from the streets. There's another option around additional kind of dealing with electric buggies, so the Goopals. Again, really useful at just dealing with kind of dumped bags and kind of issues around there. There's another option around additional jet washing crew as well. There's another option around, I think, some additional weekend staff just to empty street bins. And then there's another option around increasing jet washing of zone 1s and just around that Z zone area. So
Thank you. I doubt if any of us would be opposed to any of those ideas. They all sound really good ones. But how confident are you that you would get all 6 of them through, or are you going to have to prioritise them?
So
how much? And also, I'll put the other question in: how much at risk is that programme, and also all of this excellent work from the government cuts that we've got looming on the horizon, the so-called fairer funding paper from Treasury?
yeah, I mean but this really strikes at the heart of this paper. Fair funding is a threat to everything the council does, because the nature of the cuts that are being talked about are so large that and being proposed at such speed in terms of when we have to implement the cuts, that we need to review everything and every spend area. Having said that, I think our twice weekly bin collections and our street cleaning and the sorts of things that we're talking about in this paper are really high priority for the council. I have no intention of reducing the service level. 5.2, 6 and 7 are really hinting at my ambition to enhance the service level in these areas. I'm pretty optimistic that we can do most, if not all of this. I'd like to do all of this, but I haven't had those really detailed conversations with colleagues yet, and particularly in the context of the budget rounds that are underway. It's not right for me to. I think flagging that this is something I'm looking into is worthwhile, but that was the reason why the level of detail is relatively low. There's a lot more detail that sits behind it, but that I want to discuss in depth with colleagues to try and win their support to invest in these areas.
I'm sure we will support you in that.
Yeah,
I doubt if any of us would not support you in those directions.
Well, I look forward to
probably cross-party looking at Tim, because these are all very important enhancements for our wards, particularly the high-density wards that are difficult to keep clean, like mine and Earls Court.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to, if we do this, target the improvements to areas where there is high footfall, like you say, where we know there are issues. And I may well look to you for support in making that case, because I think this is really worthwhile.
Is. And then just more generally, how do you achieve consistency in service across the borough? We say strictly, you've got some very challenging areas like an Earls Court with a big turnover of people, or you've got some challenging estates in different parts of the borough, compared with other areas where you've got high proportion of owner occupiers and larger houses like a northern ward, which is quite stable. I mean, how consistency of service then?
It's a really good point, and I think that's where the kind of the breakdown of the Z zone, zone 1 and zone 2 comes in, and there's a really detailed specification for those areas, and that's part of the tender process that we did. So the contract has really detailed specifications and what needs to be achieved for each of those areas. That is reviewed on a monthly basis as well by the team. So the supervisors meet, and then on a monthly basis at kind of manager level as well. So if there are any areas of concern or areas we feel need additional service or focus, then that's where it gets picked up as well. And we do respond to kind of service requests as well, but overall there is pretty even distribution of service. The contract does pick up kind of busy street areas as well, so Earls Court, other densely populated areas, Oldham and stuff, do have a slightly additional service anyway, just because of the number of residents and stuff there as well. But overall, there's a pretty even spread of service, and then it's monitored on a really regular basis as well.
Thank you. I think probably the last area I'll explore is 5.2 onwards. We're talking about performance. 5.8, you suggest that the recycling on the estates isn't necessarily going as well as some other areas. And I'm wondering, we've got a possible link there between housing density and maybe barriers to recycling. Are there any behavioural barriers to recycling that you've identified, and if there are, what can we do about them?
It's a really good question. So estates overall they have a lower recycling. Certainly some of the larger estates, and especially when there's kind of bin chutes. So the actual chutes are only used for general waste. So it's much easier to dispose of general waste than it is to kind of carry your recycling to the bins, and the same with food waste as well. So food waste has gone on estates, and as I said before, on the World's End, it actually was really popular, and we had to double the amount of bins. It still must be a much smaller percentage than on a street, but the door knocking and stuff is really focusing on estates. We're also working really closely with housing and the registered providers as well to improve the bin infrastructure as well where we can. Close chutes as well. It's not that popular, but there is sometimes a fire risk associated with chutes as well, and big maintenance costs because people just ram stuff down there and get blocked and things like that. So we are really doing a targeted campaign on estates to try and improve that, like the Langwest estate, but normally bin stores in. There's going to be more recycling bins than before. Food waste bins are going in and stuff as well. So that is one of the big growth areas for recycling.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Terry and Johnny. Excellent work being done all around. This is so important for the residents. As I think Johnny, you said, it's a universal service.
Yeah, it is.
That is absolutely something the council has to get right, and you do get most of it right most of the time. And obviously we like to pick holes and things on the committee, which is our job. But in context, you and your teams do a fantastic practice, do an excellent job for us, and like to record our thanks for that.
Thank you.
That work in public. And if I leave you with one thing, it's probably the earlier conversation is communication is key for everything. And please take away that. So everything needs to be communicated to residents, particularly when we've got changes coming up like food waste, time bounding, residents need to know. So we'll leave you with that as being the takeaway from the committee. But otherwise, thank you for that, and we'll move on to the next paper. Which, Terry, I guess you're staying in your position.
Yeah, I can try
John's going to join us at the table as we move on to item 5, which is street greening and decluttering. John, would you like to introduce the paper, please?
Yes, I mean, I think essentially there's a lot of really good greening work happening, and I mean this paper wraps up some of that. It highlights some of the amazing spaces and the tree planting that's happened. I think there's a lot more we can do, and I'd like us to be ambitious and to build schemes much more quickly in the future, because I still think the period between the idea and the delivery is too great. In terms of the street scene more generally, I think the borough's had a decluttering policy for some time, and you know I'm behind that, and that's something that I think we need to continue to look at carefully because clutter pops up and it's a kind of ongoing challenge. In terms of A board, so it does appear that the existing policy is quite dated, so I think there is probably a need to review that, and maybe there's a way of wrapping that into some of the work that's underway. I know that officers have started thinking about the transport and streets SPD as a means by which we might address that. On e-bikes, I think we need to ramp up the amount that the number of bikes that we're seizing, and the fines that we're issuing to operators. I think e-bikes are part of the transport mix now, and that is now parts of how people get around in London. You can see that they're really well used by the number of bikes that we do see done, but it's not acceptable for people to leave them in that way. So we need to be pragmatic about that. If you want to get around the borough, we need to make that provision for you in terms of having places that you can park. But if you're parking it somewhere that you shouldn't be, then you should be fined. And we need to be really tough with the operators about that. So my steer to officers is really clear that we should ramp that up as far and as fast as possible, so long as it's recovering its costs. In terms of enforcement, I think we do have a reasonable size of team, I think probably relative to other parts of London. And they do quite a lot of good work, and you work with contractors as well. But at the same time, there are still too many complaints for my liking about the work that they're doing. It seems to me that in certain parts of the borough, they're not yet quite addressing the things that we'd like them to in the way that probably is needed. I want to look at what it is that we're prioritising enforcement of, because I think there's a really wide range of offences that we're starting to pick up. And it's really easy to add to that kind of penumbra of offences. But where we're serious about it, I think we need to double down. There needs to be enough of a deterrent that some of the things that people really don't want to see happening isn't happening. And then just in terms of wrapping up, there's a bit here on the shop front design guide, which I think is a good piece of work in our sport. We'll need to explore now whether we can use some of the funding that's been made available by the previous Conservative government to invest in shop fronts and other initiatives that form part of the Earls Court Action Plan that the Conservative councillors in Earls Court and South Kensington have really been pushing for, and that that the wider Earls Court community and councillors also have an interest in.
Thanks very much. Let's see if the officers have got anything to add. Let's start with John. Have you gone yet?
Actually, I think that's fairly comprehensive. Obviously, it covers a very wide area. Some of it's bags, some of it's highways. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Terry.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, well, we'll go around the committee the other way, starting with Wild Events.
Okay, thank you. My first observation is in 4.4, line 4. It is actually Draken Avenue, not Draken Street.
I noticed that too.
Yeah. Thank you. And 4.8, I just want to congratulate you that you surpassed your goal of 400 trees planted by 500, and that's really admirable and very and not very easy to achieve. So well done. But my question comes on 4.10. You're talking about treating trees and plants. And I was just curious, what type of treatment are we using? Are we mindful in a sense that we're using things that are biodegradable to and not harmful to other species in the environment, especially my favorite pollinators? That's one question. And on the same bit, I actually would recommend you to plant more oaks. They're robust. They can take a lot, last forever, but last longer than others. That's my first question.
So in terms of treatment, it is a range of treatments. So I know in parks, we obviously have to be really careful around how it impacts on plants and insects and stuff as well. So yeah, I can reassure you that there aren't any major nasties there. There's other treatments around kind of aerating the ground and stuff and things like that, which are kind of just physical treatments that they don't involve chemicals. Street trees are a little bit more tricky to do, and we do spray the streets, but the actual trees themselves, I don't think get any treatment like chemical treatment. It is more making sure that they're maintained on a regular basis, so that any kind of dead growth is cut back and things like that. So we just keep them in a good state of health rather than actual chemical treatments. Because it's very hard just to focus that on specific insects or whatever like that.
My second question is on e-bikes and their management. I'm wondering, there's two parts here to my question. One is, I'm wondering, are you getting cooperation, opposition, or collaboration from the operators, or are you getting?
It's a mixed picture, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Sometimes they do play ball, other times they don't. So we are confiscating more, and they are paying the fines now. So there's a bigger picture across London as well. I think we've got to look at. So
some of the operators want to engage and obviously value their relationships with the public sector and with the public more widely. There are other operators who are looking to effectively work in volume, and they're less considerate of that and are more recalcitrant about paying their fines. We need to be tough with them.
And is the fine we are imposing on them, you think, appropriate? Because, for instance, we have fines, and that's unrelated, but just to give you an example, for, supercars, for instance, when you find them £100, it doesn't mean anything.
That's
So is that the same for the bike operators? Because I see we're finding them and I understand we're collecting and we're taking, but it seems like the amount of bikes that are left in the wrong place, it's more or less the same.
With noisy vehicles, it's set by statute because we're enforcing under a PSPO, and so the fee level is set at £100. That's not the case for e-bikes, so we should be recovering our costs rather than seeking to make a profit. But there isn't a numerical cap in the same way. My own view is that our costs are likely to increase and therefore the fines are probably going to increase. So if you're an operator, I think now's the time to back up your ideas and make sure that you're stopping your riders from dumping bikes on the pavements. Otherwise, you might find that over time the level of costs required for us are going up as they are in all sorts of service areas.
Also on e-bikes, there is the circumference for where they can park is about 12 meters, and that is very wide. Have you at all negotiated to reduce that so that it is a little bit more closer to where we designate their parking spaces?
It's a really good question, and I will have to take it back to the team that oversee that. So that's within the highways team. I know they are looking at geofencing
Yes.
bikes, so they can't go down certain streets. So we're looking at like Portobello Road because there is a huge amount of e-bikes that go the wrong way at high speeds. So it's looking at potentially limiting or geofencing. So as soon as they go into certain areas, the power cuts out. It doesn't stop the bike, but it kind of reduces the speed. And I think that'd be the same with the parking. So you can restrict it to a much smaller area.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that actually happens, but I can be back.
And I think
Sorry, can I comment on that?
No, you can't.
No, to help to put a full one up.
Well, I'd like to Waller to finish her question and then Dora, you'll have your questions
you can
afterwards.
Just to answer your
Well, you can
your
go.
comment. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. No, that's fine.
And my final question is on 511, which is, I've noticed recently, I don't know whether in other wards that noticed that, but in my ward, I've noticed a lot of people have personal ads. I'm not talking about lost cat, lost dog ads on the lamppost, but like for personal trainers, for instance, or people giving yoga lessons or French lessons. What is our position on that? Because it is a form of street cluttering, isn't it?
They're not allowed, so.
So they're not allowed. So do we have someone to go
Soon as
to
we'll be
just
taking them down, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
because there's quite a few of them in Proctor House.
Okay.
I mean, I'm going to get my clippers out.
they're not permitted and they shouldn't be there. So
Perhaps a bit more sympathetic with the lost cat.
Yeah.
Yes, no. But that's definitely, and I am all about sympathy with
if
the
it's
lost cat.
attached to street furniture, then it's not
Yeah.
permitted.
Yeah,
All right, we'll move on.
you.
Thank you, Waller. Dora, your turn now for questions.
Okay, thanks. But can I just comment on this business of parking? Because we had this public meeting in the town hall about this, about e-bikes. And the long and the short of it is as regards to actual parking in a designated bay, whether virtual or marked out, the problem is they're using GPS, which is not that precise. So they said in that meeting they're working on, I think, using Bluetooth or something to try and improve the geolocation so that 5 meters, or I don't remember the numbers. You said 12 meters, okay. Whatever the X meters currently, which is considered to be in the parking area, will be reduced as much as possible because obviously it has to be done. So in fact, that brings me to my own related e-bike management questions. First of all, you use the word fine. It's not a fine, is it? Actually, it's just a recovery cost.
Yeah.
Management and recovery cost. Recovery. Yeah. So not a fine. So I think we've got to watch the terminology, don't we?
Yes, cost recovery.
Yeah. But the thing is, my understanding is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that it is you can only pick it up if it's an obstruction. What happens if it's sitting in a residence bay 3 meters away from? Because we get this in Pembridge Square all the time. 3 meters away from the actual designated bay. Is that can't be collected, can it, or can it?
Definitely, it's easier if it's an obstruction. I think we have been taking bikes as well. If you can say anything on the public highway is an obstruction if it's
Well, quite.
so. Obviously, if it's just across the pavement, then that's an obvious obstruction.
Yes.
But if it's blocking a parking bay, then that's also an obstruction. So it's hard. It's your own kind of.
So we could collect almost at any time. I'm intending to tell them directly.
Yeah, it's easier if it's clearly causing an obstruction. I think if it's blocking a parking bay, then.
Okay. Who can you name the recalcitrant ones? Who's recalcitrant? You said you're not willing to negotiate to talk to us or any borough. Go on. Is it lying?
Should we say that if
Go on,
they
then.
don't start backing up their ideas, then maybe in a future committee we might name and shame.
Well, this is not being streamed, is it? No.
Yes, it is. So, yes, it is in a public meeting, so I think we'll leave that.
Oh, that's the thing. Is that the thing?
Sorry, we'll let the leadership answer the question in the way that they think is appropriate. You ask the questions, they answer.
Thank you. No, that does it. That's on e-bikes. Thank you. I just want to comment on the question also that Wella raised. Amazing, the number of trees, extra trees planted, whether it's 400 or 500, is brilliant. But how many of them are not in parks?
I think the majority of those are.
Almost all of them.
Yeah.
I mean, these are street trees. These are not,
Brilliant. I thought they were more or less full up.
and yet we.
The streets are pretty full of trees. To be fair, like you've got the stat there. Nearly 25% of the borough is covered in trees, which is really high for an urban.
I know there were spaces coming up in, I think, Goldbourne Ward where there's reconstruction, new estates up. That's an obvious area for trees. So in general, it's fantastic.
The arboricultural team are really good at going out and actually surveying roads and finding those areas. The streets where there aren't trees, it's usually because of the services that are underground. You've got a lot of kind of coal stores, and there's a lot of BT, there's gas pipes and stuff like that. So it's really hard to set trees in, and we tried with kind of putting them in boxes and things like that, and it just doesn't really work. And the maintenance of them, it's too much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Laura.
So I think you kind of just touched on the question I was about to ask,
Yeah.
but anyway, so yeah, street trees. Do you have like a map of the whole borough where there is potential hazards, so that all the wiring and stuff that might not work, so you already know, or do you just say, hey, we want some trees here, and then do some research and then see if it's able to be planted or not? And also with parking.
Yeah.
So,
It's kind of the latter, isn't it? Although we hold lots of historic data.
yeah.
So there isn't a singular map, and we wouldn't have every road covered. So if there were a new request, we would either be looking at what historically we've done surveys there before, or we would be doing new ones.
And because the maps aren't as precise as they should be, so just because a map says isn't something there, then a test pit is usually done as well. So
Because the maps are sometimes wrong.
they are. Yeah.
I can imagine that would happen.
So they do a trial hole just to see if that is a suitable location.
Okay. And then with new trees, you talk about protecting them and maintaining them.
Yeah.
How often do you actually need to sort of maintain street trees? And also going back to maybe the pigeon poop, are there certain trees that are more inclined to have pigeons loitering with intent? And if so, can we maybe not use those?
You're not aware of trees that attract or deter pigeons.
These are the big issues in Chelsea Road.
They are everywhere.
There's certain trees that don't drop fruit and things like that. I know the ginkgo, the male ginkgo tree, does drop fruit, which can be quite potent sometimes. And that did seem a popular tree to plant. That we stopped that.
Yeah.
But it's good to have a real diverse range of trees across the borough as well, and that really helps with kind of pest resistance and things like that as well, and makes the trees more resilient.
And how often do you actually maintain them? What's the plan? Does someone just go along each road like once a week and just, I don't know,
There's a
tree? I don't know. What do you do?
the arboricultural team, they monitor the trees. So there's a constant monitoring going on. The trees just looking for kind of issues. But there is cyclical maintenance. regimes. I think it's every 3 years the trees kind of get cut back, if not more, depending on the species, it might be a little bit more as well. So
Okay,
yeah, there's a very detailed kind of maintenance plan for all the street trees.
okay. And then also on shopfront design, I know it's sort of Earl's Court because there's a lot going on there. But what about having a shop design guide, maybe borough-wide? How about that? Or in certain areas?
That would be.
There is one.
But it's not really enforced, I think.
Well, we can't, it should be used for determining new applications or shop fronts, and it does cover borough-wide, so it does have a specific example in it. So that's right. I mean, I think probably, if I was honest, more bespoke shop front guidance to particular, obviously, streets is much more useful.
Yeah.
And really, it's like one of those ones we have to be proactive to try and get them, because we all know that, you know, corporate companies tend to have their own brand, their own signage, and they're very resistant to change that. So I think, if I was honest, the only real way of doing it is probably doing the more bespoke guidance and having a wider action plan, which is what we're doing. We're looking at Earl's Court, just been talking to Johnny about possibly Notting Hill Gate as well. So we'll see where that goes. But we're exploring how best to do it as well. I think at the moment we don't really see that it's up to the council to provide all the money for private benefit.
Yeah.
So I think we're probably in the area of looking at match funding and possibly grants and possibly loans.
Yeah.
So we're exploring those at the moment.
Okay. So for example, when I think of it in my ward, we have Anne Lane Kings Road. So that Kings Road, and then on the way to World's End Estate, there's a shop frontage there. There's a few shops that are amazing. They really care about design, and then there's a few that less so. And I would like
you
to
want the design guides around then.
put in.
Yeah,
Yes.
potentially you would want that.
Yes,
Yeah.
something like that, exactly. And sort of following up from that in a way, but it's like the street furniture. How easy is it to take away like rusty boxes that are like, maybe they're electrical boxes that have been sitting in the street for years? How easy is it actually just to remove these things, or any sort of signage or whatever? How easy? Obviously, if it's one on a tree, you can just clip it off, fine. But if it's like on a building sticking out, or next to, it's like in the ground, how?
Well, for telecommunications equipment, providing it's not in use anymore, then it should be removed. So I think if it can be proven that is the case, then it's not that difficult to get it removed. I think the harder challenge is that, you know, the phone companies and others want to try and make sure that
Doesn't happen.
that
So they
doesn't
flip
happen.
it to advertising,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
they say that it's in use. So that's quite tricky. I mean, that's the short answer, isn't it? And then on shopfront guides, I mean, they can be a useful tool, and we've obviously identified a couple of places at the moment where we've gone ahead with them. And the only thing I'd say is that they're quite resource intensive in the context of some of those other funding challenges that we flagged earlier. I think it's unlikely we'd be able to roll out several more. Obviously, we can take away specific requests. I realise there's potentially someone in your ward that you might want to explore. I think the other thing I would say is that without funding to go with the shopfront guide, it's quite difficult because ultimately that would only be a material consideration in the context of a new application. And so existing shopfronts needn't do anything.
Yeah.
We can obviously ask them to, and the shopfront guide shows them what we're looking for and does help with that lobbying effort. But it would be much more potent if there was something that could really push them to do it.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't exist at the moment.
So yeah, sort of kind of following on any sort of council buildings that are used for shops. So like, for example, Anne Lane is a council building. And some of those shops are maybe up for new leases, and so it would be cool to have that ready. So at least you're starting the ball rolling with, for as an example, something like that. So then eventually they do just sort of follow suit with the kind of, I don't know, that's just a local example.
No, it sounds like potentially a good campaign.
I mean, I'm
Chelsea
working-
Riverside councillors to
I'm working
take
on
up.
it. Right, yeah, okay, but not just there, the borough-wide.
Well, I mean,
That's it, thank you.
Thank you. My questions I had on e-bikes have been answered, so I'll focus on trees, if that's okay. You mentioned that 500 trees have been planted. Do you also have data on trees that we've lost and the number of trees that have been replaced?
We do. I don't have it to hand, but I can ask the team to provide that for you.
That would be great. And just from my understanding, these 500 trees, they are in addition to the replaced trees and compensates those trees that have been lost.
That's my understanding. Yeah, these are
Okay.
completely additional new trees.
So I would love to see that as well, because there was a development 100 West for Cromwell Road. We had a number of really healthy, nice trees there, and lots of residents were really shocked that these were removed and nothing has been replaced with yet. So it would be good to see that data, how often that happens. And the other thing in 4.9, we talked about where trees cannot be provided in traditional curbside locations. You also could consider something else as trees, for instance, shrubs or other kinds of plantings. And how often does that happen?
Really good question. So there's kind of two aspects, I suppose. If you can't have street trees built into the existing pavement, then we have done like build outs as well. So there's quite a few in Redcliffe.
These are quite expensive. Right?
They're really expensive. Yeah, so it doesn't really kind of
So
Great
for
shrubs, money.
their roots wouldn't go as deep. So are
Yeah,
those
so-
alternatives?
So some of those amazing spaces are kind of good examples, and the SUDs as well as sustainable urban drainage schemes have gone in. So rather than street trees, it is kind of an areas turned over to planting. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but there's quite a few.
yeah, I don't think there have been that many new shrub type of schemes outside of amazing spaces, and potentially a couple of specific flood resilient kind of schemes. I don't think kind of shrub schemes have there have been that many of them.
Yeah, so some of the SUDs that are mentioned.
Yeah, they've
We've
been
got St Helens
incorporated.
Gardens, the
Yeah.
St Quintins.
Yeah,
There's a few up in North
Yeah.
Kensington. I think Pembridge Square
Yeah.
also has.
I think I'm saying they've been incorporated into kind
Wider
of
streets.
wider schemes
Yes.
generally, rather than being done just kind of discreetly as shrub-based schemes.
John,
Thank you. Okay, I'm all for decluttering streets, but I find we now have a proliferation of A-boards. And I mean, you just walk along Holland Park Avenue and they're all getting further and further out. And I find we have a property that's had 3. And even when you call officers out about them, they'll say, oh, well, they're by the curb and they're out of the way. And you're kind of going, actually, that's rubbish. Why should any shop have 3? And to be honest, I genuinely question why an attractive shop front actually isn't a big enough attraction to get people in, as opposed to this competition with A-boards. So I would genuinely love a revised policy on A-boards, because I think as a borough, if we're doing all this effort to declutter our high street, and yet we leave cracky little boards or things that people walk into. So please, really welcome that, and the sooner the better. At the very least, we do license our tables and chairs. So if you are going to have them, why can't they be licensed? And at least we can have some control over how pretty they look, or the size, as opposed to the bigger the better and the more plastic seems to sort of go. I mean, Pembridge Road in particular, I've got one side that is allowed A-boards and one side that isn't. And yeah, I can tell you, I've got A-boards on both sides of the road, and I don't understand the key decision. So when, for example, on this particular paper, it talks about the 2010 key decision, and these are prohibited. That is what the officers are doing. They're ignoring them. And so I kind of go, well, what's the point? And then on one of the questions in this survey, then asks on page 33, how long has an object already been in that pile? Less than 3 months, 3 months to 1 year, 1 to 5 years, over 5 years. I don't understand the relevance of those timeframes, not even in planning permission. I mean, I kind of look at some of this questionnaire and I go, are we are we not challenging whether this questionnaire is actually too business friendly as opposed to pedestrian or people with prams or people in mobility scooters? That actually really that should be our priority, and it's not an obstruction, it's actually a nuisance. So
Yeah, I think they're all really valid points, and I think that the point of the including in this report was actually to show how complex and kind of not fit for purpose that kind of key decision was back in 2010. So I know my colleague Andrew Burton has got it on his to-do list this year. So I know licensing is being talked about as well. So I will ask him to feed back, but he is aware that it is a growing concern for people, and we are trying to declutter, and there does seem to be more and more A-boards out there which are causing issues. So it is on the to-do list, just to give you that reassurance.
I wonder if we might, whether if the committee would agree, obviously Joanna's suggestion, and thank you, Joanna, for putting it on our agenda tonight, maybe that we make recommendation formally in the committee to the leadership to revise that policy, or to revise the policy, because it's clearly a very dusty one.
Yeah.
In 2010, it doesn't reflect reality. It doesn't reflect the changing streets. The Street, for example, has changed design completely since this was written. So would that be something the committee would agree with?
Yes, can I add just a little something? And also, is there a way we can have, because and even in planning, it's very frustrating that you have all the laws, people do use all the laws and can get away with doing stuff because it was done historically, as opposed to and the new law just affect the new things coming in. Is there a way we can have it whereby it works for the whole street regardless of when it started, and this way we have some kind of symmetry?
I think that should be possible. I'll talk to our colleagues who are overseeing this area, but I think if there's a new policy, then it should be wide, or at least gets rid of the old policy and a new one comes in.
Yeah, I think I've heard that, and I'm happy to, we're already planning to revise the policy, so I'm happy to take that as a recommendation if you are.
Okay, so we will.
I thought they're already working on it.
Clearly, it's going with the grain anyway. It's not going to be a surprise to you, but I think we want to support that as an idea. Joanna, you had some more questions, I think.
thank you. E-bike management. I was at Cobble Forum the other day, and they talked about the fact that the e-bike providers have agreed to switch off the electricity when they go into Portobello Road.
Right.
And I look at this, and I was at a public meeting last week, and all the residents are up in arms about cycling, for example, on Notting Hill Gate. And I wonder to what extent we can ask for actually e-bike, the electronic aspect of it, to be switched off on pavements. So even if you're parking in a bay on a pavement, you should only need that to get on and off, and you should be able to pedal. Whereas I genuinely look at that and I go, I think we should be looking to expand that onto particularly areas in major high streets. And secondly, and I know I've raised this with Johnny before, we have a disabled bay which is constantly out of use because it's full of e-bike bays. I think we should have zero tolerance on that. I think it's just unacceptable. And my final point, Mr. Chair, very much welcome a shopfront design. I actually would focus it more on Pembridge Road because that's the one that's got the beautiful wooden shop fronts, and they just keep being ripped out. And Notting Hill Gate secondary, but I appreciate it. Happy to work with you, Dorian.
Thanks very much for that. So just wanted to quickly touch on enforcement again. And at 510, you referred to the street enforcement team, and I will comment that we're blessed with an extremely good street enforcement officer in my ward, and I hope that's the experience across all 18 wards, that they're all blessed with somebody as good as ours. But I'm wondering how do we enforce the street cluttering policy at the moment? And it's been touched on earlier. Is it down to the single street enforcement team officer per ward, or is there any more systematic enforcement for that of the street cluttering? And are there any hotspots in the borough that you're aware of that we haven't touched on tonight that you want to raise a problem area?
I think there used to be a more targeted way of doing it. Actually, there used to be the streetscape area reviews. When I was first lead member, we still used to do those. And you form a group of residents and councillors and officers. You look pretty systematically at the ward over a period of months and look at interventions you can make on the live up realm and opportunities to declutter. So I didn't think it happens in as systematic a way as it did, but budgets as such. At the same, I think what we've been doing more recently probably is around STEP and where we're implementing schemes. So as we work on schemes around the borough, we look proactively for opportunities to declutter. And I suppose the nature of when we choose to do schemes is they tend to be in places where work is needed. And so I think on the whole, we're doing a reasonable job. But yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, there's probably more you can do.
Any last questions from the committee on the subject? No, there aren't. So thank you very much for presenting the paper. There's been once again, some really good work going on here. There's pre-planting ahead of the target. Very welcome, very popular with residents, great for the environment. Street enforcement team is excellent, really doing good work. The Amazing Spaces programme, again, there's some fantastic work which I can see in my ward, and I know there are in other parts of the borough. And we'd actually give the recommendation, and I think we would endorse what the lead member said about going hard on the bikes and the obstructions, and really taking the word obstruction to its testing it to destruction, because a resident's parking bay is an obstruction. And obviously blocking the pavements is a very obvious obstruction to the elderly and disabled and those with buggies. So please do keep up good work on that and do more. We would be very grateful. But thank you for the paper tonight, and I think that brings us to the end of A5. A6 is their work programme update. So normally I'd ask Vice Chair for an update on the working group. He's not here tonight. Have there been any meetings since we had the last meeting?
I have, Chair, since the last meeting we had a meeting on the 19th of June. So there's the working group that's C policy in particular. HO1, which agree with homes and the manipulations, and also HO4, which looks at housing size and as well. And we're also planning another meeting in November as well, which will look at more policies.
And then the final report will be ready for presentation in the February meeting.
Yeah,
thanks to those already on the committee. The other two are not here tonight, but thanks for the work on that in the absence of the other two. Are there any other comments on the work programme from anybody? Okay, next meeting on the 23rd of October. It's a specific one on flooding on the Thames Water along. And we look forward to that and hold into account which they need. And with that, we'll close the meeting at just before 5 to 8, which is a good result. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
What time is it?
Yes.
23rd of October.
Area in a way.
It's the 23rd of course.
Huge numbers.
Yeah, it says it 23rd of October.
It's not one of those areas where.
Yeah, 23rd, sorry, 6:30.
Yes.
Everything is 6:30.
And I just.
Yeah, that's what, yeah, long term.